My name is Jamon McKinney, or you can just call me Juice because that is my nickname. Let's talk about the Washington football team and how they will fare during the 2020-21 NFL season. Let's get right to it. Now, I am higher on the Washington football team than pretty much mostly every common NFL fan. I don't think this team is going to suck in 2020. I don't think they're going to suck. I think this team is going to be one of the more improved teams in the NFL. I honestly think the Washington football team might be the most underrated team in football heading into the 2020-21 NFL season. Now, before I get into the reasons as to why, I want to address Dwayne Haskins because that's going to kind of segue into how I feel about this team because in reality, if you don't have a great quarterback, you're not going to win games. Now, I think Dwayne Haskins is going to be a legit quarterback one day. I believe that he has a chance to become maybe the next Ben Roethlisberger. He plays very similar to Big Ben Roethlisberger. And I do think Dwayne Haskins one day will become a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. Now, I understand that Dwayne Haskins struggled last year and had an up and down rookie season. But there's already people labeling Dwayne Haskins a bust, saying he's no good, he's trash, the Washington football team is going to be drafting Trevor Lawrence next year, things like that. I don't see it. I don't. I think Dwayne Haskins is going to prove a lot of haters wrong this upcoming season. And I think Dwayne Haskins is going to have a bounce back season. Now, I will admit, last season, the first two appearances we saw from Dwayne Haskins versus the Giants when he was thrown into the game, when Case Keenum was playing terrible, he looked bad. When he was thrown into the game, due to the fact that Case Keenum got injured versus Minnesota, he looked bad. But after those two games, Dwayne Haskins was playing good football. I don't think people realize that. Listen, Dwayne Haskins was put in a position to fail last season. He was playing for a head coach that did not want to draft him. That's not putting a young quarterback in position to succeed. It'd be one thing if he were a 10-year veteran. No, he's a young quarterback that was a rookie last year that only started 1 year in college, and he's thrown into the wolves playing for a coach that did not want to develop him. That's a bad position for a quarterback to be in. And we've seen rookie quarterbacks struggle before. Peyton Manning threw 28 interceptions his rookie season. Troy Aikman was awful his rookie year. Heck, even Jared Goff was doo-doo his rookie season. But guess what? Once Jared Goff got his feet wet, got more experience, and got the right head coach for him, Jared Goff goes to a Super Bowl. You mean to tell me Dwayne Haskins is not as talented as Jared Goff? You are mind-boggled if you don't think Dwayne Haskins is not as talented, if not more talented than Jared Goff, in my opinion, okay? Dwayne Haskins, post Jay Gruden, once Jay Gruden got fired last year, he threw 7 touchdowns to only 3 interceptions in the games he started. Keep in mind, that's with a bad offensive line, with limited weapons outside Terry McLaurin, a defense that wasn't very good last year, and for an interim head coach. The last 3 games of the season, Dwayne Haskins, 5 touchdowns, 1 interception. In weeks 15 through 17, among all qualified starting quarterbacks, Dwayne Haskins had the second highest passer rating in the NFL behind Drew Brees. There are also reports that Dwayne Haskins has lost 20 pounds of weight. He's going to be much more mobile and more dynamic this year. He's already very underrated as an athlete. He's kind of a guy that can just slide in and out of the pocket and run for a first down if needed. Now he's going to be even more dynamic with the lost weight. And now Dwayne Haskins has a chip on his shoulder. He already had a chip on his shoulder by being passed up, by several teams in the 2020 NFL draft. He dropped all the way to number 15. He already had that chip on his shoulder. And now people are saying that he's an overall bust. People are saying he's a bust. And now he's got the even extra added motivation to prove the haters wrong. So I think Dwayne Haskins will play very well this year and have a bounce back season. Now, talking about Dwayne Haskins' coaching staff, I believe Ron Rivera is the right head coach for this Washington football team. I think Scott Turner runs an offensive system as far as being an offensive coordinator that fits what Dwayne Haskins likes to do. Let's start with Ron Rivera. I believe Ron Rivera is going to turn this team around. Ron Rivera turned around the Carolina Panthers his first season when he was there. They went 6-10 overall as a football team. A couple years later, they were in the playoffs. And a couple years after that, they were 15-1 and went to a Super Bowl. Ron Rivera is a great defensive mind. He's a great motivator. He's a player's coach and also is a no-nonsense guy. So while he's a great player's coach, he has a presence about him. He holds people accountable, and he will establish a culture with the Washington football team that I think I can get behind. I think Ron Rivera is going to turn this team into eventually legit contenders. I think that he's a very good head coach that's vastly underrated. He's a 2-time coach of the year. I like what the Washington football team is rocking with Ron Rivera as their head coach of the future. I think that he is probably the second best coach in this division behind Doug Peterson, just simply because Doug Peterson has won a Super Bowl and he won it with a backup quarterback. You know, Doug Peterson is an elite head coach in my opinion, but I think Ron Rivera is right behind him. I think he's a better head coach than Mike McCarthy. And honestly, I don't even know if Joe Judge is ready to be a head coach in New York. So I believe in Ron Rivera, and I believe he's going to turn this team around. And last year, coaching was a big issue for this Washington football team. You know, last year, the coaching staff was just not that good, and it showed because the team was overall not that good. There was a reason the team was picking top 2 in the draft because, well, the talent wasn't quite there in some areas, but also the coaching was bad. Now, Ron Rivera, along with Jack Del Rio as defensive coordinator, I believe they're going to work magic with the Washington football team, along with Scott Turner, okay? Now, here's the thing about this Washington football team that gets me excited. I think their defense has a chance to be a top 10 defense this season. And if Washington can become a top 10 defense, that means they will most likely double their win total. Why do I say that? Well, look at the top 10 defenses from last year as far as points per game allowed. The Patriots, they went 12-4 as a football team. The Bills, they went 10-6 as a football team. The Ravens, they went 14-2 as a football team. The Steelers, they went 8-8. The 49ers, they went 13-3. The Bears, they went 8-8. The Chiefs, they went 11-5. The Vikings, they went 10-6. The Broncos, they went 7-9. And the Green Bay Packers went 13-3. 9 of the 10 teams that finished with top 10 defenses last year, as far as points per game allowed, won more than 7 games. The only team that did not win more than 7 games was the Denver Broncos, and they had Joe Flacco, who's washed up but not very good anymore, and Brandon Allen starting games for them last year. So I expect Washington to be a much improved team if Dwayne Haskins can have a solid season. I think Dwayne Haskins will have a solid season. Now, looking at the talent on this defense, there's some serious talent, especially up front. You've got Chase Young coming in, who's the number 2 overall pick. I believe that he's the best defensive player to come out of the draft since Khalil Mack and Aaron Donald. He's amazing. You know, there's really no weakness to Chase Young's game. He's got power, he's got size, he's got length, and I've watched a ton of Ohio State football games. He's better than both Joey and Nick Bosa. I think Chase Young is a generational talent that will definitely turn that Washington football team defense around. Not to mention, you already got Montez Sweat, who's a first-round pick last year, at 7 sacks. You know, as a rookie, he's very good. Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne are a very good defensive tackle duo. Matthew Ioannidis was a very good player that no one really talks about. He does not get enough respect. He's a very good pass rusher. And you got several other, players on that depth chart that I feel good about. Those are just the notable names. So I think that Washington is going to have one of the top 3 defensive lines this year by adding Chase Young, because I think Chase Young was the one missing piece. Sort of similar to how the 49ers, when they drafted Nick Bosa, yes, they had DeForest Buckner, yes, they had Solomon Thomas, etc., but once they added that generational talent, that's when the defensive line really took off. And I think that's going to be the case with Chase Young. Not to mention, the Washington football team added Ronald Darby at cornerback, along with Kendall Fuller, 2 good veteran players that are solid. Fabian Monroe has some untapped potential. Jimmy Moreland is not a bad option. And listen, you've also got players like Reuben Foster, Cole Holcomb at linebacker. Thomas Davis is a good player at inside linebacker, along with Sean Dion Hamilton, who's kind of your outside linebacker, sort of inside linebacker. This Washington defense has some real talent. I think that they will, at worst, be a top 15 defense. At worst. So, yeah, I like what Washington is cooking on defense. Now, the biggest question really is Washington's offense, because I've already talked about Dwayne Haskins, but who is Dwayne Haskins surrounded by? Before I get to the positives, I'm going to point out one negative for this Washington football offense, the offensive line. Now, obviously, Morgan Moses struggled last year. I think that he's a decent option, but he's sort of declining. Brandon Sheriff is excellent. But outside of those guys, I have some concerns. Dwayne Haskins needs to get a better offensive line if he wants to reach his full potential, okay? So Washington needs to continue to upgrade that unit of the football team. Now, Sadiq Charles out of LSU was one of the best offensive linemen on the best offensive line, arguably last year in college football in LSU. He's very good. He has some potential. I don't know how good he will be early on in the season, but I expect Sadiq Charles to win the left tackle starting job. And I think that he's going to be a solid option for Dwayne Haskins' blind side. So I think that Washington needs to continue to add to the offensive line. It's not a finished product, but going forward, that's really the only true big-time weakness I see on this offense, because outside of the O-line, I actually think this team has some real talent. I look at their wide receiver core. Terry McLaurin, I think Terry McLaurin has special wide receiver written all over him. I think that he has a chance to be a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL one day. He was excellent as a rookie, and really no one slowed Terry McLaurin down. He was able to, have some very good games last year, despite having 3 quarterbacks that were very inconsistent last year. So I believe in Terry McLaurin as a player and as the number 1 option at wide receiver for this team. And I think that he could maybe become the next Antonio Brown. That's how good Terry McLaurin can become. Now looking at Steven Sims. Steven Sims is a guy that has some legit speed. He is an undrafted guy that got more playing time towards the end of the season. But once Steven Sims got on the field, he played very well towards the end of the year. So I think Steven Sims is a good number 2 option. And Antonio Gandy Golden, a guy out of Liberty that they drafted. Antonio Gandy Golden has some real potential. He's not the fastest guy, but he's a very good route runner, has very good hands, very good jump ball wide receiver, and he has some untapped potential. So Washington has 3 legit wide receivers that I like a lot. Dontrell Inman comes in to kind of be, sort of a wide receiver on the depth chart to provide some depth for this team, because Kelvin Harmon, did go down with an ACL injury. So knock on wood, hopefully this wide receiver core stays healthy for Dwayne Haskins. But Dontrell Inman's not a bad option when called upon. And Trey Quinn, he doesn't really do anything special, but he's a body. He's a guy that has some experience playing with Dwayne Haskins. So he at least is the guy that Haskins is familiar with, okay? Now, at tight end, it's a lot of unknowns. Jeremy Sprinkle, very inconsistent. Richard Rodgers has kind of bounced around the league. Logan Thomas is okay, but not great. I'm keeping my eye on Thaddeus Moss, though. Thaddeus Moss showed some real flashes towards the end of the season, especially in the national championship game versus Clemson, where he had several touchdown catches in that game. So Thaddeus Moss is the guy that I'm looking out for in that tight end room, but no real, standout guys in that tight end room right there. But overall, I think the offense can at least be a comparable unit to the defense. And what I'm really excited about with this offense is the running backs. Now, obviously, Darius Geis did recently get released because he got arrested. Ron Rivera's not tolerating those things. I don't blame Ron Rivera. Honestly, Darius Geis at this point in his career has really virtually done not very much at all in the NFL. He's been constantly hurt. Now he's causing havoc off the field. So it's whatever. I felt Darius Geis could be a very good player, but it looks like his career could be in jeopardy. I kind of feel sorry for the guy, but at the same time, not really, because he put this upon himself. But looking at the running backs outside of guys, Antonio Gibson out of Memphis, a very versatile guy that can play wide receiver, that can play running back as well. He's very good in open space. He can break tackles. He's got very underrated speed. And I think that Antonio Gibson is going to show some people how good he was in college, because he played in Memphis and not a lot of people watched his games, okay? Now, Bryce Love is sort of a question mark. He is a guy that has some potential, but he's struggled to stay healthy. Peyton Barber, he's a good, decent running back that maybe could make the team, maybe not. We shall see. J.D. McKissick is a very good, 2-down running back. And Adrian Peterson continues to chug along despite old age. Adrian Peterson is still a very good starting running back. So if Dwayne Haskins can make 3 to 4 really good throws each game and not turn the football over, if Washington gets out to early leads and runs the football, and makes enough plays in the receiving game with Terry McLaurin, AGG, and Steven Sims, this team can actually complement this defense as far as what they present to the table on offense. Now, with all that being said, I think Washington is going to win 7 games this season. I'm higher on Washington than most people. I really am. I think Dwayne Haskins is going to have a bounce-back season. I think Ron Rivera is the right head coach to turn this team around. I think Jack Del Rio will definitely help out this coaching staff as well. I think this team is going to have a top 10 defense. And like I mentioned earlier, the top 10 defenses last year, 9 of the top 10 defenses as far as, allowing points per game last year, won more than 7 games. I think Washington will at least double their win total. I think Dwayne Haskins is going to be motivated. He's going to prove a lot of haters wrong this year. I think the offense will be good enough to complement this defense. Is Washington going to make the playoffs? No, they're not. Are they close to Philadelphia and Dallas? No, not necessarily. I think this team is definitely on the rise. I think this team is going to win 7 games. Now, looking at the schedule right here, let's just dive into it. I'm not officially picking which games Washington is going to win. I'm just going to tell you what games they should be favored in on the schedule. Now, Philadelphia, week number 1, I would favor Philadelphia, but I actually think Washington could beat Philadelphia week number 1 because last year in both games, Washington had Philadelphia on the ropes. I think that Ron Rivera is the type of coach that can put them over the top and help them win these games. So yeah, I think they can actually beat Philadelphia in Washington in week number 1. Now at Arizona, that's the type of game that Washington could win. I'm going to put that in the toss-up category. I think that Washington can give Kyler Murray some problems because they're so good up front on defense. But I think Kyler Murray's ability to run around and make plays with that wide receiver core, I'd probably say Arizona wins that game, but that could be a close game. Now, at Cleveland, if Washington can get after Baker Mayfield, that's a game they can win. Because I think Washington will be able to at least move the football in Cleveland's defense. Cleveland kind of has a hole in the middle at linebacker, which definitely can be exploited by Washington's good run game. And Dwayne Haskins plays like I know he can play. I think this team can win that game, but I'd probably say Cleveland wins that game. That's a toss-up. Baltimore, week number 4. I'm not going to spend too much time on that. Washington is just not on Baltimore's level. Baltimore will probably roll over Washington in that game, okay? Now, Rams at home. I think that's a win probably. I don't believe in the Rams this year. I think the Rams are going to win 5 games. I have the Rams at 5 wins in my Los Angeles Rams preview and prediction video. So yeah, Washington I think is just going to overwhelm that weak, poor offensive line. I think that Dwayne Haskins and the offense will do just enough. Now at New York Giants, that's a toss-up game. I do think that Washington actually has a chance to sweep the Giants this year because I think the Giants just don't match up very well with Washington's defensive front. I think Dwayne Haskins and the offense can create some big plays versus that defense. But I will say, if you were to put a gun to my head, I would tell you that Washington probably splits with New York this year, but don't be shocked if they sweep them. Now, Dallas at home, I actually think that the Washington football team can beat Dallas this year at least once. And I think that Dallas's defense is overall not that good. I think that Washington will be able to move the football a little bit, so I won't be shocked if they beat Dallas. Now, coming off a bye week, they can definitely beat the Giants. Like I said, they'll at least split with New York this year with the potential to sweep them. At Detroit, that's a winnable game, but I actually favor Detroit simply because I think Detroit's going to have an agenda this year to beat Washington. Washington barely beat Detroit last year when they had a backup quarterback playing, so I think Detroit is just a little bit more explosive on offense, so that probably will be a loss, Now, looking at the game versus Cincinnati, I would favor Washington because I don't think Cincinnati can block Washington's defensive line up front. Their offensive line might be the worst in football, so I favor Washington to win that game. They should be able to move the football in the Bengals defense. At Dallas, that's probably going to be a loss. Now, at Pittsburgh, that's an interesting game. I actually think Washington can beat Pittsburgh because I don't think Big Ben Roethlisberger and that team is overall that good this year, I think that if you get pressure on Big Ben, he's going to make some mistakes. He led the league in interceptions the last time he played a full season. So, honestly, I won't be shocked if Washington beats Pittsburgh this year. I'm not very high on Pittsburgh. Now, 49ers on the road, that's going to be a game that I'm not picking Washington to win at all. The 49ers should definitely win that game. They're just a better team. Seattle at home, if Seattle didn't have Jamal Adams on their roster, I would probably maybe lean toward Washington, maybe getting an upset just because Seattle does play down the competition, but I'd probably say Seattle wins that game. Carolina at home, I think Ron Rivera is going to make it a point to win that game versus Carolina, the team that just fired him recently. So I think that that's a game that they're going to win just off general principle of Ron Rivera being motivated. And listen, I don't think Carolina's all that great. I had them as a 3-win football team in my Carolina Panthers preview. And at Philadelphia, that's probably a loss. It's late in the season in Philadelphia. They will probably be vying for a playoff spot. Not a good spot for Washington to be in. But overall, I think Washington is going to be a much improved team. I think this is a 7-win football team. I lean towards 6 or 7 wins. I'm going with 7, like I said. I think Dwayne Haskins bounces back. I believe this defense shows the world how talented they are. I think Ron Rivera is the right head coach for this team. They have enough weapons at running back and wide receiver to score enough points. I think Washington is going to win 7 games during the 2020-21 NFL season. Thank you so much for watching this video today. Please also note that the Juice Alert Sports Podcast is not just a YouTube channel. It is available on all podcasting platforms, including Spotify, Google Podcasts, iTunes, and Apple Podcasts. Also, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share this content with all your friends. This podcast is my favorite thing in the entire world right now. It is my passion. And I want more people to listen to this podcast. I really want this podcast to grow. Also, a fun fact about me is that I want to go into the sports broadcasting and media world once I graduate from the University of Toledo, a college in Northern Ohio. I am looking to become one of the next great sports broadcasters and analysts out in the world. And I potentially would like to start my own network if this podcast really truly grows. Or if I fall short of that goal, I would love to work for a big-time network like ESPN or Fox Sports 1. I am open to all networks. So if you believe in my dreams and you see or hear my passion through the screen, be sure to tell all your friends about the Juice Alert Sports Podcast. Stay motivated, you guys. Have a God bless day, and I'm out.